to everyone joining us for webinar number 2 of this 4-part webinar series for Take Care of Your Trails 2025. For those who didn't attend last week or 2 weeks ago, the first webinar was about understanding the needs of our community. One of the identified challenges most communities faced, which we found out in webinar 1, was maintaining and building a strong volunteer base. So basically, if we open up our trails to everyone in the community and make people feel more welcomed, we open up our opportunities for more volunteers. So tonight's webinar is about better understanding the experiences of newcomers to the trail world, and in particular trail building, through speaking to women who have been working, volunteering, and researching in this space. So within all trail communities, you have those individuals that are the pillars of the community. The people who often encourage new people into the mountain biking community, as well as introducing them to others, helping them progress as riders. And our first guest this evening, Kath Goody, is one of those pillars of her community. Kath is based in Wales and is known for a passion for introducing and supporting new riders. With over 35 years of experience as an outdoor educator and coach, Kath brings a unique depth of knowledge from her background in ski racing, rock climbing, and mountaineering. So Kath has raced downhill and enduro across the UK and Europe, but her true love lies within guiding riders through high mountain adventures. So as a dedicated mentor who continues to inspire and welcome newcomers into the world of trail building, I would love to introduce Kath Goody. So Kath, I'd love you to start with the story of how you got into mountain biking.
Hi everyone. I guess I've actually been riding bikes for a long time, since the mid-90s probably. But I started off riding bikes simply as something to do when it was too wet to rock climb or get out in the hills, which is pretty funny. I was completely unaware at the start of my journey into biking that racing or anything like that existed, or that it was even kind of a sport on its own. At that point it was just a practical way of getting around in the mountains where I was sort of born and brought up, visiting sort of friends in the next valleys and getting up to cliffs with all my climbing gear and back down fast enough to get last orders at the local pub. So we used to rattle down these mountain tracks on our kind of 1990s rigid bikes, having a great time, completely oblivious to this, I guess, the sort of start of this amazing sport of mountain biking. So yeah, I really got heavily into biking and it became my kind of number one passion. Probably, gosh, would be probably about 2008, 2009. Where this is following quite a nasty climbing accident, and I couldn't really climb anymore, and it was something for me and my partner to continue doing together. So we just embraced mountain biking, discovered man-made trails and trail centres and downhill and the mega avalanche and racing, and it was all incredibly exciting, and that was it. We were absolutely hooked, and I've just continued biking as often as I can since then, and sort of pursued my guiding and coaching qualifications later in the sort of, I guess, the early I guess 2019, 2020, and then began planning my move out of full-time English teaching in high schools and into where I am now, which is running a mountain bike guiding and coaching business. So yeah, that's a quick snapshot of my journey into where I am now.
And I guess we'll get into this, Kath, and it's a similar story for Fiona, but at the very start, you were very much the only woman in your riding group?
Not really, no. I've always ridden with groups of female friends because I'd always climbed with female friends as well. So there's always been here in North Wales a sort of little group of women who have climbed together, mountaineered together, hill walked together, run together, and bike together. And I think, oh, well, I've learned that's quite unique actually. So yeah, so I think I had a very different start into the sport than anyone else, than many other people actually. So yeah, it's always been me and my girlfriends either on the rock or on bikes.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue to introducing Dr. Fiona Spotswood, because a lot of FEE's research goes into what we're going to talk about now, into the barriers that women have faced, particularly in action-based sports. So yeah, I'd like to introduce Dr. Fiona Spotswood. I think quite a few of you are probably familiar with Fiona. If you've attended any of our summits or have been following the work that FEE has been doing with the FIES framework, that actually, I think, Kath, you were on the steering committee for that. In October last year, the FIES framework and the toolbox was actually launched. So I'm going to get FEE to go into a little bit about that and how that relates not only to mountain biking participation, but women in trail building, which is the topic for tonight's webinar. But as you can see on the screen, Dr. Fiona Spotswood, FEE is the Associate Professor in Marketing and Consumption at Bristol University, the project lead of fostering inclusive action-based sports, the FIES framework. And FEE, I think there's a lot to discuss based on all the research that you've been doing.
Yeah.
So I would love for you to actually start with firstly, your story of getting into mountain biking, because it is very different to Kath's experience. And I think Kath's experience is how a lot of women feel more welcoming to the sport, whereas you came from a very competitive background and you didn't feel the same barriers that some women feel now getting into any type of action-based sports, which is that you were introduced by a friend or a partner, a male partner, and you started out competitive racing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I haven't always researched mountain biking, but I have done it myself for a very long time. I started mountain biking in my 20s, and it was just an aha moment. I came from other sports. I was a runner. I did road cycling. I was always, fit, always lifting weights in the gym, and then trudging around with my friend Gary on the road. He admitted that he hated road running, and I said, "Oh, thank goodness, so do I." And he said, "Have you ever tried mountain biking?" And I never looked back. I absolutely loved it. But really, my access at that moment, which was kind of early 2000s, my access to mountain biking was through racing. And so that's how I discovered what it was. I didn't have a riding community. I didn't know local people who rode. I certainly didn't know any women at the time, and so I used to do 24-hour solo racing because that was the logical thing to do when you've just started mountain biking, of course. And then rapidly moved into 7-day racing. There was this fantastic race called the Trans Wales. I don't know if anyone's old enough to remember this in the room, but it was great. It was 7 days on a bike. Just get up, ride your bike, camp, hang out with friends, think about bikes, talk about bikes, ride bikes. It was just the best fun ever. And so I'd always ridden, and it was only much later through my research that I started asking questions about kind of gender imbalance and the progress that was being made. And really, I was interested in not so much the barriers to the barriers that women were facing. I was interested in the forms of progress that were happening and how we could accelerate that progress. My research has always been around sport and physical activity. I spent a long time, most of my research is with people who don't do any physical activity or exercise, but lots of focus on exclusion. So a lot of my research has been about motherhood and sport, but lots of different groups of consumers and how they access or don't access sport and physical activity. So eventually the penny dropped that I could actually research mountain biking. So it's been a lot of fun for the last few years.
Well, I think so. The goal of tonight's webinar is to better understand the different experiences of women across Europe, which is, yeah, that is a challenge in itself. I know a lot of your research has been UK based, and I do understand that tonight we have 2 women from the UK speaking on this topic, but you both are very knowledgeable within this area. And I think an important point is to recognize that I actually listened to a podcast with you, Fee, and that was something that you brought up, that I found myself asking this question with relation to road cycling. Growing up just riding with men from a very young age, was that my experience wasn't that of other women. That I was just used to being in that male-dominated environment, and it didn't intimidate me because I was just so competitive. I saw it as a challenge. So of course there are going to be women that, you know, that quite often we see within the media and marketing, the ones that are racing, who are probably used to that sort of environment, which is not a true reflection of every woman's experience. So I think this evening, I want to dive into that. And then the second part to that is for people who are listening this evening, whether they're from a trail association, maybe they're considering volunteering, what could be the barriers, both real and perceived, to women feeling like they're accepted within the trail building world, which is something that you touch on within the FIERCE framework, within those 4 pillars.
Yeah, thanks to Cass' influence, mainly. Yeah, I think just you know, coming back on that, I think, you know, it was really eye-opening for me when I started the FIERCE research. I was exploring women's experiences getting into mountain biking and really trying to figure out how women connect with the sport. If you think about mountain biking as having a kind of culture that people connect with, of course they're going to connect in different ways, but essentially there are a number of different components to that culture, and we draw on that sort of energy and to feel connected. And as a, you know, professor of marketing consumption, a lot of our work in consumer culture research is about understanding how brands can enable people to connect really deeply with what they have to offer, because basically it's good for business, right? So if you run a business that's a mountain biking business in some form, you want your consumers to your customers and your potential customers to connect incredibly deeply with your offer. If they connect deeply, they spend money and they invest time, energy, and resources in that consumption activity. So we talk about mountain biking as being a lifestyle sport. That's a slightly outdated term now, but for me, it still resonates. It is a lifestyle. We spend money, we spend time, our friends, you know, we talk to our friends about mountain biking, and we want as many people, different types of people, to engage in that as possible. And what I became very aware of very early on in my research, when I was spending a lot of time with women who had got into mountain biking, was that for most of those women, their access point was through men. You know, they were introduced through male partners who had already ready formed mountain bike groups, very supportive, lots of lovely stories of incredibly supportive men. But essentially, the rules of the game were laid out by somebody else. And I think women are figuring out what mountain biking means to them now. And it's complicated, and it's exciting. And you see the rise of women-only communities in mountain biking as this incredible opportunity for women to write their own rules. And it's a lot of fun doing that. But it's something that I wasn't aware of because I was totally institutionalized into riding with men, and I still am, and I still love it. It wasn't something that was a personal experience, but I recognize it's something that's really important for mountain biking now at this point in our history.
Yeah,
And Cass,
sorry,
yeah.
Lauren.
No, go.
I was just going to say it's interesting because for me it was kind of quite a shock, really, coming from the sort of mountain biking in North Wales, in this quite a friendly little cocoon of supportive women and women who I'd sort of climbed with for many, many years. The introduction to trail building and the trail building world was, being perfectly honest, a hell of a jolt, because myself and my partner and friends, when we were just really starting out in mountain biking, we were only riding the kind of trail centres, which we weren't involved in any maintenance because it's taken care of professionally. But we were riding kind of public rights of way, bridle paths, and the sort of legal trails around us in North Wales. And we took it upon ourselves to kind of go out and strim the bracken down off the side, sort out drainage in the winter. And then as we got more experienced and started exploring the steeper kind of hand-built enduro trails and began racing, it was then that we came across trail builders in their natural environment. And it was a really negative and really quite intimidating introduction to it, because myself and my friends were riding these steep, challenging trails, having a great time, going over the jumps, loving it. And when we got to the bottom, this angry man came running up to us, yelling at us that we were the culprits who were rolling the lips of his jumps flat. And did we know what we were doing there? And had we asked permission from the trail builders? And we were horrified. And sort of coming from rock climbing world, where this would never happen. You know, you can turn up at a cliff and you can go and have a go at climbs. You can kind of dangle on the rope. You can try and red point it and learn the moves, and no one will ever have a go at you. So this was my introduction to trail building. That was in about 2014, I think. And, you know, I was laughing, chatting about this with some of the guys earlier this evening. But yeah, we were horrified and really quite kind of outraged, firstly, and indignant that we'd been accused of rolling jumps, which we hadn't been, and B, that there was this kind of code of conduct or some kind of rules or some kind of community that we were wholly unaware of. And that's when I started asking questions and asking around, you know, who are these people? Do they own these trails? What's the etiquette? Yeah, so it was quite a shock. Yeah, so from that angle, get sort of transitioning from the mountain biking world, which had seemed all quite friendly and nice up to that point, into trail building was a bit of a shock for me, to be honest.
Yeah, I can see how there would maybe be a difference in this sense of ownership between sanctioned and unsanctioned trails. And I'm guessing you're talking these enduro trails, those local trail builders probably felt ownership over that area, and who are you to go ride there when you're not contributing? So I'd be curious. I mean, Kath, you live in Wales and you know the people from Bike Park Wales very well. Like, how's your experience differed from that initial introduction to what trail building is to what the guys are doing over there?
It's completely different. I think this is the sort of rise of the bike parks has completely changed the, you know, changed perspective of these kind of uplifted trails versus the kind of wild unofficial trails. Bike parks just seem, to be honest, they're just sort of sanitized big gravel motorways for everyone. You pay to go there. It's a special treat unless you're actually quite wealthy. And the trail building there doesn't really bear any resemblance to what happens in volunteer world. I've never even heard of kind of a bike park running a kind of organized volunteer led sort of dig day. It just doesn't seem to happen. Certainly volunteer groups are getting involved and are involved in England and Wales with the official sanctioned trail centre trails, but that's not the case in my area. We've even asked, you know, would we be welcome, you know, now that we have gone through the sort of qualification process and have our trail maintenance tickets, we've approached the landowners and asked, could we get involved with some maintenance work on the official trails? And they said no. They said no, the health and safety rules would be impossible to sort out. Basically no. So really the only option we have, certainly in my part of Wales, and many of the other sort of areas around Bike Park Wales and Dyfi Bike Park and the northern bike parks, is currently on the unofficial trails. But they're the trails everyone wants to ride. They're the trails that modern bikes are designed for. Yeah, it's quite a juxtaposition, to be honest. It's quite tricky working in trail world here in Wales at the moment, where it's 90% advocacy, and advocacy relationship building, immense amounts of patience and admin, compared with Scotland, where it's probably 10 years ahead of where we are in England and Wales now. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are exceptions. There are trail groups in Wales and England that have permission to work on some of the unofficial trails. I'm thinking some of the Forest of Dean, the Dean Trail volunteers. I don't know if that's the case in Bristol, is it, Fee? Do they? I think they do have permission, don't they, to work the kind of more challenging trails as well as the official.
No, I would say let's go with no is a complicated answer, but let's go with
yes.
no. No, it is challenging, and actually, I think straight off the back of reframing, where we had this conference in Bristol, where we had a lot of conversations about all sorts of things, including kind of relationships with between the kind of mountain biking and different kind of stakeholders, including landowners. I think one of the things that became really apparent was that although a lot of my work's focused on the kind of image of mountain biking in the context of recruiting diverse participants, actually the image of mountain biking, the problems we have with the image of mountain biking also means that we suffer in terms of our relationships with landowners, with funders, with politicians, and that we struggle to sometimes get that leverage because if we think the image of mountain biking is masculinist and outdated and white and narrow, that's not just potential participants who have that image, that's also the all-party parliamentary group for walking and cycling, or whoever else it is that we want to engage with. So it's really important that we work hard on all sides to change how mountain biking is perceived, so that we can make life easier for people like Kath, who are busy negotiating these relationships and trying to create environments where we can essentially create wonderful trail networks for more people to enjoy mountain biking. That's what it's all about.
I want to just rewind it back a little bit, because I think this is a really interesting conversation, but just at the start of the webinar where you and Kath were introducing yourselves, and Kath was talking about the fact that, she had this strong group of women in outdoor sports. I wanted to ask you, Fee, based on the research that you've been doing, Kath comes from a very outdoor community where these women were clearly involved in other types of like action-based sports. So the transition to mountain biking maybe was a bit more natural or organic. What has your research shown you?
Yeah, I'd say the research, the participants in the research almost all came from other cycling disciplines, but anecdotally I would say the women I ride with have pretty much all come from other action sports. So my best friend, she's a skier, but she always says skiing is her number one sport and mountain biking comes second, and then I point out to her that she mountain bikes 5 times a week compared with skiing twice a year. But anyway, let's not go there. So I'd say for mountain biking, the barriers to entry in terms of physicality and skill and fitness are reasonably high in comparison to other cycling sports. But a lot of women, they cut their teeth with road cycling or perhaps cyclocross or gravel, and then they transition into mountain biking from there. Some women do go straight into mountain biking, but I'd say that's harder to do. Depending on the trail network that you've got. So that topography is so important. If you've got easy blue entry level trails on your doorstep, it's not impossible to start mountain biking as your first experience of cycling sport. And when in Bristol, we do have very, very easy, very accessible blue trails, and we do have a lot of beginners and lots of groups that are set up for beginners to access and try mountain biking. It's not so easy if you live in the Tweed Valley. The opportunities for easy trails are much more limited. So that does genuinely change and shape what you can do in terms of grassroots activity and community building. But I'd say the transition for the women that in our research came from other sports, but it was very much around somebody taking them by the hand and introducing them to the sport. Only one of my participants and I'll never forget the conversation because it was such a moment. She said, I just looked at mountain biking and thought that sounds like an amazing sport and something I want to I want to give it a go. And I thought that's exactly what we want. We want to create an image of mountain biking that's out there that women think about and they think, yeah, that sounds amazing. That's what I want to try. But unfortunately, that so rarely happens. Normally, the job of the person who introduces women into mountain biking they have to actually break down all the myths and tell that woman, actually, we don't do massive gap jumps when we ride very often. Normally we just go for a nice gentle poodle in the woods with our mates. But it's like a best kept secret because that's not what we share in the media generally. So it's a job of work to introduce new people into the sport. Definitely.
Yeah, and I think a large piece of that puzzle, and Kath, you can speak about this, is running those women's only events. So I think that's like the gateway to mountain biking, and then what we'll do is as well talk about how that can also be like the gateway to women being involved in trail building activities. So Kath, do you want to share some of the positive experiences that you've personally been involved with or you're aware of? Because Fee Wallace, who's in the Women in Mountain Biking Network steering group, has been doing some fantastic work up in Scotland with the Aberdeenshire Trail Association. And she started out very much as a volunteer and really built up that whole community of women that in the end, their dig days were split 50-50.
Yeah, that's really amazing. And that's exactly where we're aiming to be. But I think you need to kind of rewind a little, because I think that until you have a much higher kind of critical mass of women in mountain biking at all levels, I don't think we're going to see overall, rather than just in these kind of mountain biking pockets, I don't think you're going to see a massive increase of women in trail building or trail maintenance until there's far more women mountain biking. Because, if we're still at kind of 80-20 in the sport, men to women, then there's an even smaller proportion of that 20 will be interested, will have time, will be riding at the sort of trails where they kind of want to get involved in trail building. I think for women, I think it's really important to recognize that there's a lot more demands on their time than there are for many men. I'm not going to overgeneralize here, because I know the guys out there do their fair share, I hope, of the kind of domestic tasks, the child rearing tasks. But the fact of it is that there's fewer women have less time to play. So if women have less time to play, and they're mountain bikers and they're runners and they're road riders and they're gravel riders, then how much of their precious free time are they going to have left to dedicate to volunteering in trail groups? I think it's quite telling that most of the women who dig and volunteer with us at Trail Collective North Wales are either older, like myself, where their kids have flown the nest, or they're the youngsters who haven't had kids yet. And that's actually the same for the guys, to be fair. And a lot of our digging, our trail maintenance, we do in the evenings. But many women can't come to those because they're taking care of the kids, or they're running them to swimming club or gymnastics club in the evening. We have excellent turnout when we run our trail maintenance sessions at weekends and give plenty of notice. I think it's how you organise your trail maintenance sessions is really, really important if we're going to attract more women into this space. But if we dial it back a little bit further again, I think it's all about getting more women into mountain biking, and then organically it will just be a natural transition for more of those women who are keen riders to want to get involved in trail maintenance. So I think it's actually really quite complex. It's quite nuanced, that it's not just what can we do to attract more women to volunteer and come out trail building. It's how do we attract that small percentage of women who are keen enough and have the free time as well as the confidence, as well as having an active trail association close enough to them for it to be practical to turn up to maintenance sessions. So yeah, I think I've covered quite a lot in
I would
statement.
totally agree with everything you just said, Kath. I think, you know, it's going back to that idea that I spoke to earlier about deep engagement. You know, we there's so many benefits to, you know, doing everything we can to open mountain biking up to different communities, different audiences. And, you know, mountain biking as a sport, you know, if we can open that up to women, and not just open it up, but to do everything we can to enable women to form lifelong, you know, relationships, fall deeply, madly in love with mountain biking forever and ever, amen. That's what we want, and that will drive volunteering opportunities. It will also drive leadership as well, and women moving into different parts of the industry. One of the things we do in Bristol, I'm a trustee of Ride Bristol Trail Association, and we started a monthly women only, women and marginalised genders ride once a month, first Saturday of the month. And we always, there are 3 or 4 kind of women ride leaders there, and we always sort of start by talking a little bit about the Trail Association and what the Trail Association does and why we're there and what we do. And I think what's happened, I mean, I remember to begin with, there was a guy in the trustee group who said, "Oh, make sure you tell the women about the dig." And I thought, they're not going to come to the dig. There's no way they're going to come to the dig. You know, a lot of the women that we attracted in the early days, they hadn't, you know, they were knocking cobwebs off their bikes. There'd been no women's group in Bristol, not really, for you know, a decade, and they might have ridden a little bit before they had kids, but since they had babies, there was no mountain biking in their lives. And, you know, this was their chance. This was something in the diary, and there was a lot of nervousness. They came with these, you know, gloriously outdated bikes, but they remembered the fun that they used to have, and they wanted to get going again. But I thought to myself, they're not going to turn up to a dig day. There's no way that this transition is going to happen between I've just about drummed up the courage to turn up to a mountain bike ride, you know, to turning up and wielding a spade around. But I tell you what's happened over the last sort of year and a half. These women have come more and more regularly. They've formed internal relationships. They meet those other women, they've friends they've formed more regularly, and they're gradually forming part. They feel like they're connected to mountain bike culture in Bristol. We also, importantly, the Trail Association also runs a monthly, you know, Ride for Anyone. And because we have so many women ride leaders in Bristol, it's the women who also lead the mixed rides on the Thursdays often. And so that means that we get a higher proportion of women turning up to those Thursday rides than normal. It's more than your average 15-20%. And so we are sort of bringing women in to the culture, and we are getting more and more women come to the dig days, because it's part of what we do. It's how we talk about mountain biking in Bristol. If you ride, you dig. And it's become a really lovely thing. And then women are posting, "Oh, this was so much fun. Look at this picture of me. You know, this is my bit of trail." And they take us on the ride and say, "I'll show you the bit that I did." It was great. And so it's all this ecosystem that's all kind of interconnected.
Yeah,
Manon joined our Ride Bristol dig 2 weeks ago and saw some women there. Yeah.
I completely agree. And I think the more what seems to be happening across Wales and across the UK are more and more women's events and ride outs and festivals which involve digging. And I think that's really important. I think in the past, over the past few years, we've seen a heck of a lot of riding festivals where it's all been about sort of coaching, guiding, skills acquisition, which is all fantastic. But I think now more and more of these events are starting to include a workshop on trail building, which is the way to do it. You're entirely right, Fee. It's incorporating it into the culture of mountain biking, and through doing that, then it will. And I do think there's a lot of value in women only dig days, just in terms of confidence building, giving women the space in which they can, you know, ask questions, have a laugh, say they have no idea what this tool is. What on earth do I do with that? How do I hit the ground with that? What does this do? Fall over, pulling branches out. All of that sort of stuff is, I see it all as a stepping stone into giving women the confidence to enable them to join any dig day, one involving, a mixed one. And I think it's a stepping stone, that's for sure. But I think it's really important to kind of give women the opportunity to get involved in every aspect of mountain biking culture, whether that's going for a recreational ride, whether it's racing or trail building, anything, and at all levels. I think that's really important. And it's good to see the NGBs in the UK starting to support this now more and more. That's the national governing bodies, in case anyone's wondering what I'm on about. But certainly there is a realization dawning. Certainly our Welsh cycling here for us, they are really keen to talk to me, and they've supported everything I've asked them to sign, that's kind of based on advocacy and building relationships with landowners. I think they are beginning to appreciate that without a fantastic trail network, Wales isn't going to have a fantastic future in mountain biking. So they have to get behind us. And it's only the NGBs that can really influence the politicians. Me and Manon have tried really hard. We've actually managed to get face to face with some Welsh politicians. And but without a big push from the people who are kind of publicly controlling our sport, there's a limit to what we can achieve just as volunteers.
I guess my follow-up question there, you both have shared some really inspiring stories and examples of what can be achieved. But for anyone that's joining us this evening or will listen to this recording of this webinar on YouTube, what are some like immediate or actionable steps that a trail crew or trail association can take to get more women involved?
You're muted, Kath. Kath, you're muted.
Thank you. It's got to be about how you organise and the story you tell and how you introduce what's going to happen. I think it's super important if you have women in kind of trail maintenance coordinator roles. So they're actually leading the dig and explaining what's going to happen on the day. I think definitely my experience has been that if the women who turn up to volunteer feel comfortable, happy that they know what they're there for, what the aim of the session is, and have it all kind of demonstrated and explained in a friendly, encouraging manner, whether that's by a female trail coordinator or a male, then that really, really helps. And I think taking, as I mentioned before, into account that it's likely to be weekends that will be popular rather than evenings. Make it family friendly, if possible. That's tricky when we're operating in a semi-official space, shall we say, for us. But certainly, if you can make it as family friendly as possible, and really just making sure that everyone has the information and the instructions to build their confidence. It's that kind of turning up and not knowing what you're supposed to be doing and what you're doing it for and what that tool is that's going to cause problems. It's just really important that everyone, women particularly, know what to expect when they turn up. So it's how you introduce it and how the sign-on process begins is really important, I think.
Yeah, and just building on that, I think I totally agree with you. And I think, we mustn't underestimate the importance of women role models. And we've got some incredible women role models in the trail building space. And we're very lucky with that. But there aren't a huge number of women in trail building. And so it is really important. That's why it's part of the FIAS framework is leadership, getting and encouraging actively, proactively encouraging women into positions of leadership is so important, because so what I mean by that is, if there are women coming regularly to trail building days or digs, can they be encouraged to take the next step and train as coordinators, because it's so important. It's disproportionately important to have women in those positions of leadership to role model for other women. All of my research shows that women just come to mountain biking and other action sports from a really different position to men. They're and it's really important to understand that women are often on the back foot. Just culturally, it's systemic. We're on the back foot. We assume that we're going to be outnumbered. We assume we're going to be in the minority. We're going to be marginalized. It's going to be an uncomfortable situation. It probably won't be, but that's the assumption. And so we have to work doubly hard to make sure that in advance, all the communication, all the imagery shows women very, very clearly that they're not going to be made to feel stupid, and they're going to feel like legitimate, welcome parts of this organization, this day. One of the ways to do that is through women in leadership positions. Communication is really, really important to set the tone in advance. And also, I think the role of the Trail Association in terms of community building outside of the dig days is also vital. And I say that we've made a conscious decision in Bristol to spend a lot of effort and energy building community through group rides and other activities, film nights, and looking after our people. Our most important stakeholders are us. It's got to be fun, and we've got to bring people in and show them that being part of Ride Bristol and being part of the trail community in Bristol is a lovely thing to be part of. And from that flows volunteer time, and people giving their own time, their own resources, their own energy to actual volunteer time on the trails. I would add that I think the family friendly thing is something we haven't achieved in Bristol, and it's so important. I know that they've managed to have kids along to dig days in Forest of Dean. I think Andy's on the call, maybe he can talk about it, but I do think that's really important. I ran a kids mountain bike festival last summer with pedal progression up in Bristol and Ashton Court, and we had like a little dig day kind of session, and the children absolutely loved it. And we wanted to do it because we wanted to show them that these trails that they ride with the club that they love, they're not there by magic. Lots of time and effort goes into those trails. And it's really important to respect them and understand where they come from. They thoroughly enjoy. We went and dug a hole in the trail that they could then fill. It was a bit ridiculous, but they enjoyed the process. It was great. So it's really important to get kids stuck in as well, and try then to bring them into family trail building experiences. I totally agree with that.
I really like that point, because as a coordinator of Take Care of Your Trails, and why we're here this evening as well, this webinar series is part of this campaign that Inver Europe runs annually, is looking at not just getting women involved, but the youth as well, because it's really important that the next generation become trail stewards and see the value in taking care of these natural places and the trails that we have, because you can't take them for granted. And it's twofold as well. Like, to your point, Fee, if the kids can come out and enjoy a bit of a dig day and get have a few volunteers that are taking care of the kids, so then mum and dad or the parents can go off and be involved in like the real digging. It just works for the whole community and the family involved as well. I realized that we have about 15 minutes left, and I really wanted to open up the conversation to people joining, because I'm sure there's questions that people will have. So I'd like to take this opportunity. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat if you don't feel comfortable opening up your mic. Otherwise, raise a hand, and we'll start a bit of a Q&A. So who would like to start? I see Sonia from the Women in Mountain Biking Network Steering Committee has joined us. And yes, Sonia works for DIM and has run actually some really successful for Women's Dig Days. I don't know if you want to share anything from that, Sonia.
Yes, I wrote it in the chat already. A few weeks ago, we ran the Women Only Dig Day with our local DIM chapter in Nuremberg. And yes, it was a great experience because 15 women showed up, and it was such a great atmosphere. And I didn't expect it that it was quite yeah, it was a great experience because I didn't expect it that it would be so much fun and so productive at the same time. And yeah, um it was so supportive atmosphere and so much laughing, and um we yeah we did more than we expected by ourselves, I guess. And yeah, and it was a trail at our trail network in Nuremberg, and two women are trail stewards for this trail, and they organized the dig day. And we had the leader from our local trail crew, and he taught us some techniques and organized the group where we should build. And yes, then we had a great day out in the woods, and yeah, we did great work, I guess. And we made a test ride, and every woman yeah rocked it. It was
Excellent.
it was great. I never expected that.
It sounds brilliant. One of the women that I've been talking to recently in Wales as well, she wants to organise for a whole trail to be women only built in the middle in mid Wales. And I think it's such a great idea. I think women would flock to do that and really make it a kind of make it a real thing. Hopefully get it covered by some magazines, make a real feature out of it, and show a brilliant trail has been built top to bottom by kick-ass women. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, we also had this idea, and we also had the opportunity to build a brand new trail. Yeah, but then it was a little bit difficult. I guess the momentum was not there. It has to be the right time. I don't know. Yeah, but the stewardship of the two women for this trail, I guess, is already a big step, and they are responsible for this trail. And every time we are riding there with groups, and they are joining, they say, it's my trail, I'm responsible for, and I build this and I build that. And yeah, that's great.
I think, Sonia, when we first spoke last year, we were actually chatting about trail building, and I must have asked you the question if you had experience with DIMB and your trail network in particular, these women only dig days. But the response back then in 2024 was, no, we've tried it before, but it never really worked. So is the reason why it worked this time because of those trail stewards, or as Fee mentioned earlier, it's really important to have those role models?
I guess because of the female trail stewards, because they brought the event in their community, and they are in a women only community too, and in the DIM chapter. And this network, I guess, was the key.
That sounds it sounds really fantastic, Sonia. Could I ask you a question? How did it feel different with the women only dig compared with a mixed dig? What do you think was the main difference?
It was not such competitive, I guess, and it was more supportive, and it was just funnier and easier, and I don't know. I would say you have to feel it. It's but I I guess I have not the detailed and the right vocabulary to explain it how I felt it, but it was just easier and lighter from the feeling, and not that
I think
like
what
that.
you're trying to express is, I think Hans shared a great video that was just launched recently about the FIAS framework. And there is a moment in that video where I think it's you actually talking, Fee, over the footage, where women participating in women's only events, how that feels, how it feels different.
Yeah, the reason I was giggling was because, you know, you could have been describing women only riding in the same way.
Yeah.
And the piece of research I'm just about to start writing up is this magic source. It's about this magic source of when women come together and take part in an activity which is traditionally male dominated. And it's not just mountain biking. Honestly, the women only communities are all over the place. There's DIY women only communities. There's an amazing group, a Facebook group called Women That Can't Surf Good. I don't know if you've seen that. That's literally what it's called. And it's like this incredible part of it is sort of women feeling like they're owning something, taking something back. There is something kind of political about it, but also there is this sense of just lightness. And there is this sort of, I mean, I'm using loads of feminist theories to try and make sense of it, because it's the only way I can. It's like feminist solidarity or feminist something's going on. And it's about removing hierarchy and competitiveness, but at the same time being able to push hard. So you're not losing, it doesn't become soft or gentle. It's hardcore, you know, it's like working hard, progressing fast.
Yes, and what I felt, that every girl was so proud of the other girl, and
Yeah.
and you say it, you don't hold it back, because you want to say that the other women made a great job, and you want to let her know, and you want to give her a good feeling that she made a good job. And it was a feeling like we are creating something great together.
Yeah.
And not someone is working here and someone is working there, and then you have a look, what are you doing there, and is that right, or could I made it better? But it was, for me, it was a complete different feeling, like at women only rides. Because sometimes I have the feeling at women only rides, I want to ride more and not talking so much. And with trail building, you can do every talking and working at the same time. And riding and talking is sometimes a little bit more difficult. Yeah.
I think Manon had one final question.
Yes, hello. Really great hearing the experiences from these different women-led communities. I guess I have a question or a comment that I've been thinking about, and at Reframing we had the Go On Girls who organise an inclusivity festival, but they want to open it up to mixed groups, so not just women this year. I was wondering how to bring this lightness into other digs, because I think there's a recognition that maybe there are also men or any newcomers who are nervous to join a dig. And I think we can learn a lot from these communities of making a dig more less intimidating to turn up, and wondering what, yeah, I think Kath's already said the things she thinks make a dig more inviting, having structure, but how to create this feeling that everybody is welcome and everybody can get involved and they don't feel too much expectation. I think maybe Sonia, you're saying it feels less serious. I think sometimes a dig can feel intimidating if you're not sure you know what you're doing. So it would be nice to capture some of this feeling from the women's digs and, you know, use that to get more people involved generally.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have a crack at that one, man. And I think it's going to be down to the trail coordinator, and I think that's why it's so important that as many women as possible can actually be trained up to lead digs, because I think certainly the style when I lead a dig, it is a very different style and tone to when one of the guys does. It's just different, and I just think it's the, I don't know whether it's the soft skills, and I don't actually think that's because I'm a woman. It's possibly just because of my experience as a teacher, as a coach, as a leader, that I can, you have to read the room, don't you? And if there are a lot of inexperienced people there, I really think it's important to make it fun and funny and sort of crack jokes. And so it's just about the tone. And sure, you've got to do the kind of safety talk, you've got to do your sort of toolbox talk, but you can do it in a way that's kind of funny and amusing. And it's up to the leader, the person who is leading and coordinating the dig, to set the tone. So that, I think, is down to sort of personality as much as anything else. And a lot of, yeah, so I don't know, I'm not sure. They say, you know, leaders are kind of born, not made. And I know you can kind of, but you definitely have to read the room, I think. And that would be my approach. I treat everybody the same. And I definitely kind of have the confidence to run a dig in the same style I would for a women only event as I, you know, as I do if it's mixed. So that would be my take on it. Just get the right person leading it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think, you know, at every point in my research, people have always said, you know, it's not just women who feel intimidated, and it's not just women who struggle with the kind of you know, masculine sports culture. And I'm like, absolutely. And more men that I'm meeting and doing research with and spending time with are saying to me over and over that diversity in mountain biking, in all parts of mountain biking, including trail building, is good for the overall culture, and it's a better experience for everybody. And I think that's something we've really got to hold on to. I definitely think there's something about the coordination of these things, and being aware, being kind of reflexive about different people's experiences, and not assuming that everyone feels totally comfortable in this environment. And there is something, and it's probably, you know, your personal experience, but also your teaching experience, and the fact that you lead so many different groups, Kath, that you've got that innate kind of automatic assumption that you need to speak to people and not assume that everybody's totally at ease. You know, that's you know, that's the same, I guess, if you're taking a group of people over the mountains on bikes, and it's the same kind of skill, that standpoint, that understanding of different standpoints. And I think that's, you know, something that we you know, yes, it comes naturally, but I do think we could probably train that as well. And, you know, it's not just about how to use a spade, right? It's about how to foster a community. So maybe that's something we need to think about building into training if it's not already there.
Great. I think there's no other questions. So if anyone, this is your last chance, because I'm aware it's 8:30 now in Europe. Otherwise, we'll finish up for this evening. But thank you so much, Kath and Fee, for joining us. It was a fantastic conversation, and I hope everyone who attended got a lot out of it. I certainly did. And like I said, this is being recorded. So I'll edit that and get that up on the INBRA Europe YouTube channel. So please feel free to share it in your networks. I know sometimes it's quite hard for people to attend these meetings in the evening. So let's share this knowledge around within the trail community, because I think it's really important. And Take Care of Your Trails is during the month of May. So there's still plenty of time to register your trail crews or to share that information within your networks. Have a look at the map and see if there's something happening in your area as well. So thank you all for joining. And the next webinar will be in 2 weeks' time on Tuesday again at 7:30 p.m. And that will be titled Beyond the Dig, which will be hosted by our advocacy officer, Hunt Stoops, with special guest Emily Brown from SRAM. Emily is the co-founder of the Spearfish Trail Coalition in the US in South Dakota. She's just an awesome human being. And she's also one of the few SRAM field guides. So that's going to be a really cool conversation about the advocacy work that she's done to get those trails go ahead in her area, as well as she's got some really interesting perspectives, you know, when she wears her industry hat and when she wears her trail association hat. So please tune in for that. All right, thank you very much and have a great evening, everyone.